Hello, welcome to another video in this course. In the previous video, I explained to you guys how the web servers work, how web server works, and also what this bunch of code that I wrote here does. So, in this video, we are moving further. We want to look at something called routing. So, like I explained in the previous video, now this server is up and running, it's functioning, and it is ready to receive requests from the client, but it is not going to do anything right now because we actually have no route that we're actually not listening to any route. We haven't configured any route or path for the server to listen for. So actually this is more like a server listening but doesn't understand what the request is. So we need to explicitly specify some parts for a server to listen. Can't just undo anything that's been thrown at it. So right now, if I to demonstrate that, let me just make a request to this server now. So you can access this server by typing this in your browser. You can just go to our browser and type localhosts on port 8000. So to explain this, we started our server. When we are listening on our server, we used a port which is an integer a and it's 8000. So to browse or to navigate or to send a request to this server, we have to use localhost port 8000, or you can use the IP address of 127 127.0.0.1 on port 8000, which is actually also the IP address of your local machine, not the IP address of your machine, but like a local host IP address for your machine. So you can access this server with either of the two URLs. So now here we can see an error here, right here, that says cannot get forward slash. So that means the server is actually listening, but it's not listening on a specific port. It's not listening for a specific path or for any path, or if it's listening to a path, we are not actually navigating to that path, so the server cannot handle our request for now. So what do we need to do? We need to create a route for the server to listen to. So whenever the user or the client makes a request to that route, our server understands it and executes something. So to do that, we are going to make use of app once again. So whenever we are dealing with Express in this file, we are going to use app because we already initialized or instantiated Express and stored it in a variable called app. So whenever we need to use Express, we use app. So now we are going to do app.get. Now app.get is something that allows our user to or that listens for a get request from our user. So do not worry about what a get request means for now. I'm going to explain it later during this course. But for now, know that whenever we're listening for a route or to a route, we use the app.get. So now I put the forward slash there. Now forward slash, as it is in every file system, if you're familiar with file systems, probably Linux file system or Windows file system, you know that the forward slash alone represent the root directory. So if you make a request to forward slash, that means you are making a request to the base directory. So for example, something like expressjs.com is the root directory. So it's like saying expressjs.com then forward slash. It's still going to take us to this page. But if I navigate to something like getting started, we're going to see that this changes to slash en slash starter slash installing.html. So we can see that the route actually changes. But if I go back to home, or if I remove all of this from it and go back to this, so it takes me back to the root. So the forward slash alone stands for the base URL or the base directory. So now we are listening for a get request on the home directory or the root directory or the root path in our case. So this app.get takes in two parameters. Now, if you don't understand this, I recommend that you take a JavaScript course and also a Node.js course. So because we are going to do some things right now that I will not be able to explain during this course. So just bear along with me. You can take a JavaScript course to get you up to the speed or to help you catch up with the speed of what we're doing right now. So now this app.get function takes in at least two arguments. Now the first one is the path, and also it takes in a function that serves as a request handler, and also it takes in a it takes in a path and also a function. Now we want to pass in the function to it, which has two objects, request and response. So I'm using REQ and RES to depict the request and response. You can write them in full. You can use something else, but it's much more better to use request and response in this case. So you can write request in full, and you can write response in full. Either way, but I prefer using the short form. Now, you don't necessarily, or you don't really have to use RES and REQ every time. You can use whatever variable name you come up with, but it's much more better to use something that will point directly to functionality, because right here now, like I explained in the previous video, whenever a client tries to communicate with the server, it's sending a request. So this object right here is standing for the request that is coming from the server, from the client side, and here is a response. Now this response is the thing that the server sends over to the client side. So it's an object that contains everything that, or every function that the client can use to, and that server can use to communicate with the client side. So that's why we're having these two things here. Now there is also a third parameter here. You can have a callback function here, but in this case um we're not going to use that right now. So what we want to do right now is we want to do console the log request made, sorry, made to, request made forward slash. So whenever a request is made to this part, we want to console.log this. We want to send this to the console. So now we are not going to see anything on our browser, but we're definitely going to see the message logged to the console here. So right now our server is up and running. Let's switch to our browser and view the changes. So I'm going to go back here and refresh once more. And okay, that is still running. I'm going to change this from the IP address to localhost just to make things easier. Okay, since something is wrong somewhere. All right, yeah, nothing is wrong. It's actually made the request twice. So we can see here request made to forward slash, request made forward slash. But here on the client side, we can still see activity. The page is still loading. um and it's not going to stop. It's going to continue like this because there's actually something that we ought to do, and that is we need to resolve this request. We need to show or tell the client side that we're done with this request, and here is the result of the request or the response from the server side. If we don't do that, then the client side is going to continue waiting for a response from the server. So we can either send a response back to the client, or we can terminate the request. So now let's look at ways with which you can send a response back to the client. And before we do that, I just want us to log a request object to the console so that we can have a look at what it looks like. So now after logging the request to the console, we want to use a function to send a response to the client, which is rest.send. So here we want to send a request handled successfully. So we want to send this back to the client, or before that, we want to log the request object to the console so that we'll have a look at it. Now, if you if you are new to Node.js, or if you've not worked with Node before, every time you make a changes or a change to your file, you make changes to your file, to your JavaScript file, you have to restart your server. So you can stop your server by pressing Ctrl C on your keyboard, the Control key and C on your keyboard, and to stop the server, and to run it again you can, or to stop the execution and to run it again you can use the node, then the name of your file. In our case it's index. Now, as I said in the previous video, uh you don't necessarily have to put .js after your file. It will automatically be recognized as a JavaScript file. So here we are now. We have started the server again. So let's go back to our browser and make the request again to the server. So right now you can see we have a response back, and everything, the page has stopped loading. We have a response back from the server, so we have something to show that yeah, the server actually handled our request. And if we look here at our console, everything is messed up a bit because we're trying to log a very big object to the console. So I just want to show you what it looks like, or the request object really looks like in Express. So I'm going to expand my terminal a bit, and we're just going to quickly walk through this. So here we, okay, let me just move to the top. We have a lot of things right here. Um, Now we can see things like the query, we can see things like the port, the host, the authentication, hash, the original URL, the base URL, so many things that are actually needed. Now, the reason why I'm showing this right now is we might have to reference uh, some of the properties or attributes of this object, or some functions that are contained in this object later on during this course. So I don't want it to be like I'm doing something out of nowhere. So here is where I'm getting all the functions. In case you see me calling request dot something, so it's actually an object that has been provided for me. It's not something that I'm going to implement myself. So you can also log this to the console on your hand and take a look at everything we have here. Though not everything will be clear now, but we're going to definitely use some of them during this course. So yeah, that is what a request object looks like in JavaScript in Express. Let me terminate this server and clear out my console so that we have more breathing space. So in the next video, I'm going to show you how to create multiple routes and enable our server to listen on multiple routes. So until then, feel free to leave a like to this video if you enjoyed it, and also remember to subscribe to this channel if you've not done so. I'll catch you in the next video.